Hello, I'm Ken Pugh. I have been an active, involved member of Dayton Avenue Presbyterian Church for close to 50 years. I was the treasurer of the Montessori School, Dayton Avenue representative to the Self-Development of People Committee, youth advisor, elder, deacon, usher, sound technician, and gospel choir member. Over the years, my family has been deeply ingrained in the life of DAPC, as we like to call it, as witnessed by our involvement in numerous confirmation classes, youth groups, baptisms, weddings, choirs, and funerals. In fact, the last service to be held at the church was the funeral for Regina, my wife of 45 years, on January 5th of this year. Needless to say, the closing of the church has been very traumatic to us all. However, we are a resilient and future-oriented group of church people and come before you today to make some requests of the presbytery. But first, allow me to give you a little history about our church. The Presbyterian Church organized as a congregation in 1874 at the corner of Dayton Avenue and McCubbin Street in St. Paul, Minnesota. There was a wood-frame church for services and an addition added for Sunday school. These buildings soon became inadequate, and Cass Gilbert was engaged to design a new building in 1885. It was one of his first major commissions. Construction began in 1886, and the finished building was dedicated in 1888. The old wooden church was remodeled and used as the Sunday school. By the next year, the Sunday school had outgrown their space, and Cass Gilbert was again engaged to draw plans for a building that would house an assembly room with classrooms on the main floor and a kitchen and dining room in the basement. The church was redecorated and Cassavant organ was installed in 1925. This was the first Cassavant organ in St. Paul. The church is graced by beautiful stained glass windows. On the west, there is a memorial Tiffany-style window of Gabriel announcing the resurrection, made of over 500 pieces of stained glass. In the east transept, 3 memorial windows depict the feeding of the 5,000, the nativity, and the choosing of the apostles. In the south wall, there is a memorial window on the Ascension of Jesus. The Little Workers, a society of young girls in the 1880s, gave 11 small stained glass windows which are installed around the sanctuary. This beautiful building has been in constant use as a Presbyterian church since 1888 until January of 2019. 131 years. In June of 2019, it was sold to a private business person who will renovate it to accommodate adult and child daycare, an event space for community gatherings, and a personal apartment. The exterior of the building, including the stained glass windows, is under historic preservation protection. Well, that's the physical structure of Dayton Avenue Presbyterian Church. There's more to the church than that. There's carrying out mission and ministry in the inner city. In recent years, the church has been a home to a Montessori school, as I mentioned before, Boy Scout troops, a clinic for young mothers, a food shelf for people with AIDS, WIC services, anonymous groups, adoption services, and many other worthy nonprofits. There have been concerts and organ recitals open to the public. One mission that grew out of community work with House of Hope Presbyterian Church was the clothing closet, first started to answer a need for school clothes for children. Here is Ruthiana Fink to share more about that.
My name is Ruthina Fink, and I'm the daughter of Arthur and Martha Sternberg. My parents started the Dayton Avenue Church Clothing Center probably in the mid 1970s. This was a time where schools were being integrated, and there were a number of the families from the area of the church that were being bused to schools outside of the area, to more middle-class areas. And we learned that some of the students, the young people, didn't feel totally comfortable in the clothes that they had when they were in the same classroom as those from the more middle-class schools. So the church began thinking about this. How can we meet this need? So the clothing center was started. Clothes were donated, the doors were opened, and one of the things unique about the church clothing center was that anyone was welcome. You didn't have to have an ID, any kind of documents, any proof of citizenship. Everyone was well respected and encouraged to come and shop. Over the years, there were more volunteers that came to help. A couple of the people, Bob and Marge Hennessy from House of Hope Presbyterian Church, donated many hours and were very helpful. They brought volunteers from their church also, and they were helpful in soliciting funds so that new things could be purchased for the clothing center, like underwear and socks and that kind of thing. So the clothing center continued. My parents were very dedicated. In fact, they even would plan their vacations around the time the clothing center was open. But well into their 80s, they decided that it was time to pass on the leadership. And it was very fortunate that at that time they were able to do that with some wonderful volunteers, Elaine Ullman and Kathy Lawhead, and I think you're going to hear a little bit from them right now.
Hi, I'm Elaine Ullman, and this is Kathy Lawhead, and along with Sharon Gagner, who couldn't be here today, we were the last leaders of the clothing center. I was aware of the clothing center long before I became an active part of it. Dedicated volunteers from Dayton Ave Presbyterian Church kept it going for many years before being joined by equally dedicated members of House of Hope. Dayton Avenue could not have sustained it alone without House of Hope and shoppers who joined us as volunteers. One shopper who volunteered became a church member. When asked to say what the clothing center meant to her, she wrote, "I appreciate how the church has met our family's needs." She went on to add, "I am glad that I am giving back and helping others." We were appreciated by the community for providing a source of clothing and household items as well as friendship. As one shopper wrote for us a thank you note, he said, "Thank you all for being good and so nice, and thank you for treating us right. Thanks for being a blessing." Clothing Center truly was a blessing for me as I got to know shoppers and volunteers, shared sorrows and joys, and always, on reflection, felt good about what I was part of.
Hello, I'm Diane Fulmer. I joined Dayton Avenue Presbyterian Church in 1974, a few years after I began attending at the invitation of Dr. James Johnson, who was Director of Technical Research at 3M. We were colleagues, and he had told me that this was a unique church, and he thought it would be a good church to create mission and community service. Indeed, I found that to be true. One of the programs that sprang from the community action of Dayton Avenue is People Incorporated. To look at People Incorporated today with a $50 million budget and 65 programs in mental health, it's hard to believe that that organization started around an old wooden table in the basement in the kitchen of Dayton Avenue Presbyterian Church. It started with a group of men meeting around that table over coffee and cookies and conversation. Men were neighbors of the church who were trying to recover from the ravages of life and the horrors of wartime military service. There were very few programs in the late 1960s to help people heal and get on with their lives. Reverend Harry Mahakian opened the church basement and that unique table and invited the men in to be a part of a community around that church. Not long after, Harry was offered a large home down the street from the church, and that became the first group home of what was to become People Incorporated. The program was named Dayton House for the street that it was located and emphasized sobriety, but very quickly we learned that there was a mental health component to the recovery for these men. The concept of dual diagnosis was not very common in those early days. The second program of what was to become People Incorporated was a group home for youth in mental health. The legal paperwork for the organization was completed in 1969, remarkably 50 years ago. The incorporation signers included two people from Dayton Avenue, Harry Mahakian and Ron Burdash, Pastor David Ling from Church of the Way, Pastor George Neerman from North Como, and Pastor Harry Schweitzer from Central Presbyterian Church. Back in those early years, we did not dare to dream that People Incorporated would get to a place of helping so many. I joined the board of directors in 1970. The organization was 1 year old and in the midst of major challenges in funding and leadership. In 1974, we hired our first executive director, Don Bump. For 13 years, we had the same president, Ernie Cutting, an attorney, treasurer, Frank Stephenson, who worked for the city of St. Paul, and I was vice president from 3M. We were all dedicated to seeing the continuance of People Incorporated and joined with other talented and dedicated board members and staff members, and I wish I had time to give credit to all who made this organization work. It took not only a village, it took the whole city to move People Incorporated through infancy into the start of stability. In the past, there were programs in chemical dependency, epilepsy, and childhood disabilities, but People Incorporated today is centered on mental health. And it all started at Dayton Avenue Presbyterian Church. The path to a $50 million budget with 65 programs and service to 12,000 people annually started at a modest wooden table in the church basement. It's been a path that's winding, at times uncertain, but it was a remarkable group of people at Dayton Avenue Church who said in 1969 they would dare to make this leap to start a nonprofit to provide life-saving and life-supporting services to our neighbors. We pray those services continue.
Dayton Avenue Presbyterian has a long history of preparing its members and friends for ministry. Reaching back into the history, early 1900s, the son of the first pastor of our church, Dr. Morris Edwards, became a missionary serving in China for many decades. In the years prior to my arrival in 1985, reaching back into the 60s, Dayton Avenue and its pastors mentored numerous ministerial interns, including the recently retired pastor of St. Paul's United Church of Christ, Norma Ray Hunt, and many others. My 30-year tenure at Dayton Avenue Presbyterian, at least 6 students interned with the congregation and went on to ordination in the PCUSA or in ministerial associations for chaplains. The first was Lisa Watson, who was providing chaplaincy services at Regents Hospital. Alana Simone Tyler is currently serving as part of the ministerial team at Westminster Presbyterian, Minneapolis. Reverend Tara Parrish is currently serving in hospital chaplaincy. The Reverend Anthony Germain Ross is now a PhD candidate at Union Seminary, New York City. Reverend Cindy Wonder is currently serving as a pastor of a church in Wisconsin. Kang Roo completed his internship at Dayton Avenue and then planned to continue his education with a PhD before returning to his congregation in Seoul, South Korea. Dayton Avenue also took 3 members under its care as they initiated the candidacy process during my tenure here. Reverend Carrie Allen, currently serving as a lead chaplain in one of the major healthcare systems in the Chicago area. The Reverend Hay Chang, who is providing chaplaincy services in care facilities in the metro area, and Ruth Huizenga Everhart, who is serving congregations east of here. Dayton Avenue has also served as a launching pad for ministry. In addition to official internships and sponsorship, Dayton Avenue has also served as a place of discernment and exploration for ministry. These include Mark Purinton, who Dayton Avenue welcomed as our Christian education director following his graduation from Macalester College. Mark was seeking discernment in his sense of call to ministry during the late 1980s. While he felt his call was valid, he concluded, as he concluded his time with us, that there was not a place for him as a pastor and a gay man at that time in our denomination. A similar challenge faced another CE director, the Reverend Hillary Freeman, who came to Dayton Avenue facing expulsion from Luther Seminary after she came out as a lesbian. Dayton Avenue advocated that Hillary be allowed to graduate, after which she worked for many years as a community outreach officer with the Minneapolis Police Department, and eventually was ordained to that ministry by Plymouth Congregational Church in Minneapolis. The Reverend Sandra Gray faced a different dilemma. She found it difficult for a 50-plus second career woman to find a full-time call after graduation. Sandy worked here part-time for approximately 3 years before she received a call to St. Croix Valley Presbyterian Church. Dayton Avenue provided a springboard for a very different type of ministry to member Mel Duncan, founder and executive director of the Nonviolent Peace Force, when in the 90s the congregation awarded DAPC's peacemaking offering to Mel so that he could travel and participate in an international conference held at The Hague. While there, Mel connected with several like-minded folks, and from their preliminary conversations and planning, the Nonviolent Peace Force took place as an unarmed NGO trained to intervene in conflicts internationally to resolve conflict between warring parties. MP has succeeded in fulfilling that vision now for 25 plus years in numerous places around the world, and it got its jump start at Dayton Avenue Presbyterian. DAPC also helped some notable musicians early in their career. Organist Steve Quisnell accompanied services here early in his career, and composer Stephen Paulus also graced our services with his talent in his early professional years.
Over the years, we identified other needs that we could meet. With our pastor's help, we added these services: healing prayer services for individuals and families, healing worship services for the congregation, contributions to All Saints' Day, nursing home visits, emergency financial assistance for members. We made and distributed thousands of handmade pocket prayer shawls, which supported many individual ministries in the congregation. We made large prayer shawls and lap robes for members suffering loss and long-term illness. We sent memorial cards to church families a year after their losses. Active in the DAPC Players, provided leadership and volunteers to Liberty Plaza. Thank you for viewing our work and our service. It's been an honor to tell our story. There's a sweet, sweet spirit in this place, and I know it's the Spirit of the Lord.
We are at Liberty Plaza Housing Complex, a couple blocks from what used to be Rondo Avenue is now Highway 94. In 1969, this became an affordable housing complex sponsored by Dayton Ave Presbyterian Church. A lot led up to this. This neighborhood had been stately old mansions, and then as housing deteriorated, the mansions were broken up into little tiny apartments. And in the late 60s, this neighborhood became a war on poverty transformation. And so Dayton Avenue Church, along with some other churches, chose to participate in this. We got a loan from the Housing Urban Development and started this complex. You'll see apartment buildings and townhouses, and later a community center was built here for the people. Dayton Avenue had already been active in trying to ease the transformation from deteriorated affordable housing. At first we had trouble getting the plaza filled with people. It was a transformative time. People really didn't know if they wanted to live in Summit U. Management was spotty at first, and it really became full, which it is today, with the first refugees that came to Minnesota. Our church sponsored, along with McAllister Plymouth, the first Hmong refugee family to come out of the camp into Minnesota, and we housed them in a townhouse right over here, a household of 10. They came straight from Thailand, one overnight stop, and then into the apartment here in February in the middle of the winter. Within about 2 years, Liberty Plaza was majority Hmong, and at one point I believe it was about 90% Hmong. The Hmong people have moved on to their own houses, and the plaza now has a lot of refugees from East Africa. In fact, 90% of Liberty Plaza is East African now. Of those, the majority are Somali, but there are also some Ethiopian that live here. So we have a community, we have playgrounds, we have people that live here that feel safe in this community. One of the things that made this a real community and not just houses that you live in is the early resident managers started services, started English second language classes, English language learner classes. These evolved in the community center to extensive services with job search, after-school tutoring for children, after-school programs for children, and English language learning. 4 of the Somali women were certified to be translators through these services programs. Quincy Housing Development Corporation decided last April it could no longer try to find the money for services. So all of a sudden, all these programs that make this place a community and help the people access the outside world, they were lost. In the days of long light and warm summer months, the Liberty Plaza playgrounds are full of children. But as dark sets in and cold, children in Liberty Plaza come home to an empty house with working parents. They and their mothers and fathers are asking us to restore the services of after-school programs, of English language learners, of job hunts. We hope that our legacy as a congregation can be used in part to help get these services back to the housing project that they call their neighborhood. Mahmoud speaks for other neighbors in his area.
My name is Mahmoud Kanyare, and I lived in this neighborhood for about 4 years. There are many positive things about this neighborhood. One thing that I see that's very positive is the diversity. People from different countries who come together and share the neighborhood together. Thank you.